Thanks, Sarah. Hopefully we get a tuba debut here soon. And thanks to Nikolai and everybody else that helped get me here. I really appreciate the opportunity. And while I recognize that they're not inherently directly linked, I'm coming fresh from a weekend at CGI, which was also a great experience. And so I'm sort of on Clinton tour right now, which is fun. And I hope that I understood this group to be engaged and trying to open up a little dialogue. I changed the title of this talk on the plane this morning after being inspired by some of the conversations yesterday. And it's not that I don't have strong opinions on these things or haven't been working on them for a long time, just myself personally, and I think in a lot of ways the world at large in the way that we're looking at some of the most critical issues of our day is evolving. And I think it's important that these sorts of talks don't come out of a can, and it's not the same one that we do all the time, because these are complex and nuanced issues and they require thoughtful engagement. And so as much as I feel like I could be considered an authority on some of the more innovative entrepreneurial approaches to development, I also try to be wildly curious at all times. So a lot of this might come out a bit as a question as much as a presentation of our experiences. So I hope you permit me that. Global technology, universal empowerment, and local learning is actually something that I would present as an outcome that we should be striving for more than maybe a methodology that we're using. So why was I invited? I have worked for the last 10 years at the International Renewable Resources Institute of Mexico. So that was a nonprofit organization that was started by a series of university professors in Mexico City. And they were working at the cross-section of social justice and environmental sustainability, trying to understand how using social inequality as a lever, how could we make advances in environmental sustainability and vice versa? Why do the byproducts of pollution and climate change disproportionately affect the poor and people in marginalized communities? And so that inherently led down a pathway of working with technologies. And we were chronically underfunded at all times, which is something I would recommend in terms of innovation, and which is why you shouldn't work at the Gates program. They just have too much money. They're too lazy all the time. Innovation often comes from lacking. And so at Erie, one of our being chronically underfunded, one of our methodologies was to spin out social businesses. And so we've done a number. The one I started was called Sistema Biobolsa. We started R&D on that about 10 years ago, patented some technology, which you'll hear all about, and started a social business in 2010. And for that work, I was awarded the Ashoka Fellowship in 2011. That's a lifelong privilege and responsibility. So I spend a lot of time as an Ashoka Fellow working around the world with aspiring and budding social entrepreneurs, trying to work as a mentor, helping them work through challenges and maybe some of the learning curve points that I've gone through. So as a baseline, I was recruited by Charity Water about 2 years ago to develop a sustainability program for them. And so that afforded me I ended up working for about 1.5 years with them to design, launch, and pilot a sustainability program to affect the 22 countries where they worked. I was personally in 16, and we launched programs in all of those 16 that are currently working. So I hope to explore all of those and more, and talk a little bit about the learnings from that. So I'm going to start where I started. I grew up on a small farm, and so after a not so direct route, when I found myself traveling through Latin America and meeting small farmers, I found an inherent kinship with a group of people that we've essentially lost in the United States. So we've lost on the order of about 99% of our farmers since the turn of the century, or the last century, I guess. And so what that means is that almost nobody grows food at any significant scale anymore. So the amount of people that do are very small. And so what you lose in a community when nobody for their work or for their profession goes to work every day with in the soil and working in the environment, quite literally, is that you actually can, it's palpable within the fabric of a community how people interact with weather, how they think about seasons, how they're aware of nuances and changes, and just the degree to which there's a communal interface because of the fact that you're growing food for your neighbors and vice versa. That all of the adages of sort of community support and the kind of concept around barn raising really is born in these rural communities where there's such a literal need for people to help one day in someone's harvest and to return that favor the next. And so I found a great kinship working with small farmers in Latin America who outside of the US also face a number of more distinct challenges. And so for me, on the one hand, it was a refreshing contrast to essentially what agriculture has become around the world. And that is the dominant in terms of economics is a monoculture, which is run as industry. And it's run through economies of scale, trying to overlay the pin factory onto a natural ecosystem. So the idea of just bigger, better, and essentially drenching our soils in fossil fuels and trying to scale up biological systems that really do tend to resist scale and or quality, and scale often don't come in the same package. What I found in terms of looking against that system was also that farmers in these contexts, principally energy is a huge challenge for them. It's costly because they're either collecting it from the forest or they're paying for it out of very limited incomes. The health burden from smoke is, I saw a statistic that I hadn't actually seen before. It's like having 200, getting the indirect smoke from 200 cigarettes a day for a woman. So that would be an unbelievably unpleasant experience. And that's what's happening to people. So about 5 million people die around the world each year. About 80 to 90% of them are women and children due to just direct smoke inhalation. On the flip side, the Green Revolution is alive and well. It started in Mexico, which was essentially a deep-pocketed attempt to push chemical fertilizers on rural farming communities. And what that does unchecked, if you're not actually simultaneously thinking about soil fertility as you're adding nutrients to the soil in the form of chemicals, is you kill soil and now you just have dirt. So you're farming in a medium that might as well just be a hydroponic. There's no biology actually in the soil that's taking the minerals from the soil and converting it into things that are usable for the plants. So you need more and more chemicals every year, and chemicals directly linked to fossil fuels until sort of the last 18 months, we're on a rising trajectory in that sense. And that's obviously a number of issues related to exposure to chemicals, and the reality is that nitrogen fertilizers basically are used by plants on the order of about 20% of the applied amount, and the rest is either volatilized in the air as nitrous oxide, which is a greenhouse gas, or ends up in our watersheds, which is why we have blooms in places like the Gulf of Mexico. And so these smallholder farms, actually a report was just released by the FAO, and 80% of the food that we eat is still grown on small farms. And so while there's a narrative that small farms around the world, and I'm speaking globally, not in the US, but as a global, if you were to take all of the calories consumed in the world, 80% of those are coming from a small farm. And that is kind of flies in the face of this logic that it's sort of a novelty that small farms still exist. And they're also hosting about 80% of the world's poor. So still on the order of about 2 billion people living on these small farms, supplying food to about 6 billion people, and they're living in poverty, but they're simultaneously playing a role in food security. So a very relevant cross-section and a very interesting place to be, both in terms of the quality of humans that you meet there and the relevance that they have in some of our most pressing issues today. And one of the things they don't have, and I love just pushing it all in your face. I have another presentation where this actually has like a smell to it, but that equipment wasn't here. But this is just manure, close up, just to like make the point. So it's great. Heifers right across the street, we work with them. They're giving people cows and pigs and stuff on increasingly smaller and smaller parcels of land. It's not an actual benign concern, the accumulation of animal waste, both in terms of enteric disease, which happens to sit right along poor indoor air quality as a massive killer in the developing world. But it's also same thing with chemical fertilizers. Too much nutrients in the water stream causes a process called eutrophication, where you've got algae blooming in lakes, and so you're reducing the quality and quantity of water that you have available to the agricultural system. So this waste management, and then as it sits there, it's bubbling off methane gas, which we all know is about 20 times to 25 times more potent than CO2 as a greenhouse gas. So these small farmers, simultaneously being kind of the victims of climate change in terms of their ability to react to changes in climate, are also smaller but important drivers still in this sense. So imagine if we could have a system that could treat their waste and give them energy and fertilizer all at the same time. That's my sales pitch. Anaerobic digesters have been around for a long time. They think they were sort of discovered when an Egyptian went down to check out some like clogged plumbing in a pyramid and exploded. Since then, the gas lights in temples, the street lights in Chicago in the 1900s, run by biogas. It's just a simple, any organic waste in a closed area will just use the natural occurring bacteria and will produce a high percentage of methane. If you optimize that space, you can make a very high percentage of methane, which is just essentially natural gas is 99% methane. Biogas is about 65% methane. And I realized that there'd been, for about the last 50 years, a ton of small-scale designs. We installed them all in Mexico. None of them really worked that well. So it was this sort of logic of appropriate technology, which is give cheap stuff to poor people rather than giving poor people quality, long-lasting things and just thinking about how to finance it. So I worked through an environmental engineering degree, coming up with this design that we patented in 2010, which is essentially a modular anaerobic digester. It has basically all industrial qualities. It's made from the same material that you would line chemical beds with or landfills. It'll last like 100 years in the sun. It's this inert, sort of rough material, but it's also slightly flexible and allows us to prefabricate it, make them in Mexico, and ship them all around the world. So in about 2010, we kind of emerged out of a nonprofit haze and realized that if we were going to make these things and actually make it happen, we had to start a social business, which we did, and none of us knew anything about business. And so we went about thinking about the design and how we could actually get these to people, adopting to this sort of domestic sector here. So this was our design criteria. I found it in an old notebook, actually from 2008. And it had to be durable. The first thing, it had to last a long time. It had to be easy to use, easy to install. It had to be very adaptable. I didn't want to have to like custom design one for every farm, since there's 400 million small farms. It had to, I have price in quotes there, which is important. I was struggling with the idea of the concept of expensive just as a word, right? So expensive, Walmart has really made us consider that term. If you buy something at Walmart that you traditionally would have bought somewhere else that would have lasted 10 years, you bought it at Walmart and it lasts 2 years, but you saved 10%. Any economics majors in the room? That's not cheaper, it's more expensive. But so we use the term cheap and expensive in relative terms. We started thinking a lot about that, which is sort of the idea that Mohammed Yunus cracked in terms of microfinance, that you can help people make better investments over the long term. So we wanted it to be low price in terms of a really good payback, and then obviously accessible. It needed to be modular, and it needed to be uninstallable, which just means that when you install a concrete dome digester, you can't take it out. So if people stop using it, then you just have this big church filled with poop sort of installed in someone's land. It just can't go anywhere, which doesn't work for carbon offset programs. It doesn't work for microfinance or a number of other things. So this is what we came up with. Sistema Biobolsa, basically all the waste from a farm is going to go in one end, these modular containers. It's going to digest similar to the way that our bodies digest food. We're using bacteria that's not our own, sitting in our guts. It's digesting. Some of us produce more methane than others. But this thing is optimized to extract the energy and methane from all of this organic waste. And then what happens to the remainder is that it's been chemically transformed to be a really perfect mix for plants. So plants actually can't absorb the nutrients from raw manure. It has to go through about a year of composting, in which time a lot of the nutrients, principally nitrogen, volatilize off as a gas or run off. And so that's why raw manure is not actually a great fertilizer. This transforms the raw manure into a fertilizer that can be used directly. We can, the smallest unit can fertilize about 3 hectares a year. We make large units that go up to about 100 or 200 hectares. Currently, we're running motors, so direct motors to run like milking machines and forage grinders. We have grid interconnected electrical generators. So these are larger dairies that are just connected to the grid, making their meter run backwards. Boilers, stoves, a number of things. So this was the technical challenge, right? We had to prove the benefits. Really, we measure everything by ROI, so the return on investment for farmers in the field. We figured that essentially would be our bottom line. It would prove that if it's a good investment for the farmer, it's going to work in the long term. And we measured that due to their savings in terms of energy, fertilizers, and a number of other things, trying to be very, very transparent and very concrete and literal about how we measured it. We didn't want to try to inflate that. We tried to be as conservative as possible. Rule number 1 is always under-promising and over-delivering in these contexts. And then, obviously, on top of the economic benefits, we had these social and environmental benefits, which we didn't really lead with. We like them to be excellent byproducts of a really good economic investment, which is often how smaller farmers are thinking. They'd love to be, they are stewards of the environment, but they can't necessarily make economic investments just on that altruism. They need other good reasons, but we actually find that people do respond to their role in climate change and water contamination because they're seeing those impacts all the time. And this is what it looks like on the ground, right? So this is a Mayan family. I use them quite often. She had a pulmonary disorder because of smoke inhalation, where she would actually go into like an allergic reaction anytime I was around. They couldn't afford LP gas. It was a really tough situation. Heifer and the local organization gave them about 6 pigs. We followed about 3 months later with a biogas digester, a slightly larger one, so she could meet all of her cooking needs, and they haven't had a wood stove installed for about 3 years. And so to put in context how significant that is, her relatives in about a 100-kilometer radius have been cooking with wood stove for many millennia, right? So 3-stone fires are still used much in homes and cooking techniques, as they have for many thousands of years. And now there isn't a cook stove in their home. They have a elegant gas burner that they use, and the mom had an inhaler. She was going through many inhalers a month. She's had the same inhaler for about 2 years now, which has been really amazing, and they save money, and she uses the extra time that she doesn't collect firewood to make hammocks. Sounds a little quaint, but it's what we're kind of going for in that sense. And so the challenge then became, how do we do this many thousands and thousands of times to actually have a significant impact? This is kind of where we ended up. We started a factory that's actually like a legit and big and growing factory in central Mexico. We teamed up with a number of organizations doing education, promotion, coming up with a whole curriculum around how we get people to love and adopt this technology. And then we teamed up with KIVA, and KIVA is a kind of one of the original crowdsourcing funding sources in the world. They innovated on top of both crowdsourcing and microlending at the same time. We designed their first non-MFI, so non-microfinance institution products. So we were their first group that just sold things and was trying to offer a payment plan to make them more accessible. And then on top of all that, we really are, in this day and age, probably people here within the public policy are thinking a lot about, or public service rather, are thinking a lot about measuring what we do, right? Using data to make decisions, making sure we're recording what's working and what's not. And so we're born on top of that because of the carbon market. We really had to be pretty strict about how we documented everything. This is what it looks like on KIVA. So we present a guy who really wants a digester. This is a nopal farmer. He's got about 20 dairy cows. $525 was essentially 40% of the digester. He came up with the rest of the money, took a loan, paid us back in about 10 payments. Our loans in KIVA fund in about 24 to 30 hours, which is like pretty phenomenal. People from around the world supporting our work. And then we pay it back. And that's kind of what I did through trial and error for a number of years. Got us a relatively successful business out of it, a thesis, and we really started to stir things up. Our experience was kind of the first to start professionalizing the digester. There was a lot of people and college students sort of downloading anaerobic digestion material from the internet. They'd go on like a Peace Corps type thing, but without the 2 years, they'd go for like a long weekend, talk about the benefits of biogas, install something that didn't work, and then never come back. And so when we started exploring the Latin American countryside, it was strewn with failed projects. And so we really started realizing that like the methodology by which most organizations in the development world work is it's all about planning, fundraising, all towards this culmination of installing a project. And then the day the project goes in, everyone's there, and there's ribbon cutting, and there's photos, and a lot of congratulatory speak on achieving the project, when this project has literally achieved nothing on that day. Like that is the day in which it has done absolutely nothing for anybody. Ribbon cuttings, or a piece of cake or a champagne or whatever it would be, should happen at year 3, year 5, year 10, when impacts have actually accumulated over time, right? So I can't tell you the amount of successful sort of blogging that happens around failed projects that are literally doing nothing, and they're being sort of touted on their sort of artificial first day success. So we just became obsessed with this idea of there's no congratulations until month 6, which is the time, it takes about a month for these things to start up and start working. It takes about 3 months for people to just kind of get over the idea that they're not cooking with farts and it's not gonna smell weird, and that there's just like a learning curve when you've been doing something for thousands of years and now you're just changing the way you cook. I mean, we're not talking about like impersonal things. We're going into people's homes and talking about how they're cooking, and fire and gas flame perform differently. A lot of pretty deep changes that we're making in people's lives. So 3 months in, we've already done about 3 visits by that point. At 6 months, if they're still using the technology, which means we've corrected any little hitch, they're still going. At that point, they've now not bought 2 tanks of gas, and that's just where the rubber hits the road. And it's amazing, and I think we're probably all the same way. You're skeptical until the moment that you're like, wow, like my pocket's just a tiny bit heavier. I needed something on this day. Like we have these little parties for when the gas truck comes, and like he starts unloading a tank, and people, like we kind of like wait for him. And it's a little bit of a PR stunt, but it's really fun because he's like, what do you mean? Like, is somebody sick? Like, why aren't you using gas? And so when people start saving money, that's when we realize that they're likely going to be a user forever, and then they essentially are on like an every 6-month monitoring, so for the recording of the carbon credits, unless they owe us money, and then we show up every month and try to collect it. And so that's where we started. We gained a decent amount of recognition for actually being just so focused on both data collection, impact monitoring, and just going back, and so creating these long-term relationships. I was inspired partially by a group called Kickstart. So this is a friend of mine, Martin, started this company. And so these are basic treadle pumps, basically. So it's a foot pump, really just attacking this cross-section of like where a farmer basically loses efficiency and productivity, which is irrigation and the ability to provide water to soil, which is sort of seems like the most basic thing. This allows this happy couple in this photo, but 170,000 other families today to pump water and expand the amount of ground that they're irrigating. We had this conversation about 2 years ago, and I thought it was funny because he kind of had the same sort of like design criteria, and he'd come to the same place. What I noticed in his list, that there was a few places where he was already thinking a little bit more about the model than I was, right? So I was thinking about technology. He's already saying things like culturally appropriate, usable without training. He's already sort of hinting towards how he's going to scale this technology and thinking about the sustainability of it as an intervention. Another friend of mine started Solar Sister. So this is a group that is actually technologically agnostic, so that just means she was going to buy the best quality solar lamp or lighting system is out there. But her focus is on women entrepreneurs. So her entire thrust was based on how do we take technology that's already proven. So she didn't need design criteria, she needed a going to market criteria, right? And so she started thinking about who would be my most reliable people. She got to women not because she was a woman, but because of like a lot of data around like repayment and honesty and trust and how women operate in these cultures. She has 1,200 female entrepreneurs in 3 countries today, and they're doing really, really well in the sale of lamps. And so this is someone who took the technology to the next leap, thinking about how do we make this sustainable by creating a network of promoters, things that are doing that. The next one is someone, Bunker Roy started this, someone I've had the honor to meet a number of times. In India, it's called Barefoot College, and essentially their theory is that the wisdom of traditional communities really needs to be the baseline by which we're driving development, right? So this is now not thinking about technology, not thinking about going to market, it's about thinking about like, what is the actual ethos, or what is like our driving belief as we move these things forward, which I thought, you know, those 3 together mixed with mine in terms of a trajectory of thinking, and realizing that this isn't something where it's just about a product or it's just about a market scheme. You really need to be thinking holistically about what kind of impact do you want your product or intervention to have. And the obvious answer should be long-term and impactful, but how you get there and the values you use to get there are also very, very important. So I was recruited by Charity Water in 2014, August. I said no adamantly for like 4 months because I was like, I'm an obsessed entrepreneur. I like live in burrowing mounds of manure. Like I'm never going anywhere. Like you couldn't take me out in public in New York. It took a few months, but I actually played around with the idea. My mom, I hadn't lived in the continental US for about 15 years at that point, so she was sort of pushing for it. But also, I realized that the list of things that I had to do to be able to leave my company for a year to design this program was probably the list of things I should be doing anyways in case I was hit by a bus. So I later took the jump, and I was convinced. I was convinced by two things. One is within the social entrepreneurial movement, the sort of underlying theme, and it doesn't necessarily get the headline a lot, but it's empathy. So it's the idea that technology is not going to save us. Economic models are not going to save us. Better communication is not going to save us. We are going to save us. And the only reason we're going to do that is because we care about ourselves and one another. Empathy is not natural to the human species. We learn it. And you learn it by being involved in cultures that are inclusive, that care about other people, that use dialogue and language and wording and actions that prove that they care about other people. And it's actually doesn't work to care about some people and not about others. Empathy is something that isn't actually something that should be chosen. You should care about all people and actually probably all things. So within the Ashoka network, that's the sort of underlying theme that we go to. Charity Water started as someone who doesn't know anything about water. He does now. I shouldn't say that. Didn't know anything about water. Knew that it was a big problem. He was a club promoter in New York. What he was really, really good at was conveying a message and telling a story. Through his storytelling, he's gotten tens of millions of people to donate, and maybe it's just $10 or $12, but to a cause that they maybe don't understand about. And the beauty of this is that he's done that by convincing a few million people to run campaigns because they care about clean water for 22 countries around the world, and then they activate their friends who care about them. It's a perfect chain of empathy, and the outcome has been the largest private flow of water directed funding in the world, in the history of the world. So they're currently the largest private funder of water in the world, and they do it on the backs of lemonade stands and all this fundraising. It was this unbelievable flow of empathy towards innovative problems solving a basic need problem. So water actually wasn't that interesting to me at first because I was like, I'm working in agriculture and energy and climate change. Like water is just a mistake. Like water is like, there's 642 million people that don't have water, and that's just a mistake. Like a government missed them, our funding's going to the wrong place, you know, it's like the lipstick budget could solve it, right? But it actually turned out to be more interesting than that because it has a lot to do with behavior change. Meeting basic services with entrepreneurial skills is actually a really interesting thing to think about, especially as, just coming from CGI, it's like almost every hour someone new comes up with something that's like, such and such is a basic human right. Like things that didn't exist like 5 years ago is now a basic human right. Someone was like, internet access is a basic human right, which seemed funny to me since like it didn't exist about 10 or 15 years ago. But as more things become basic human rights, we need to get better at solving those kind of problems entrepreneurially. This company did a great job. The thing is, this proving it thing was amazing. They were the first people just to put a GPS coordinate on the water projects that you funded. You could go online, see what you funded, and they would bring you right there. So it was this transparency that people hadn't seen before. But it was also an image of transparency because we were guilty of the same thing. They took the photo the day the well was installed and then they never really went back. So I was given a very simple task: keep all the water flowing. So at that point we'd installed about 15,000 water points in 22 countries, and they're like, we just want those all to keep working. I was like, perfect. So they sent me straight to Liberia. That's June of 2014, if anyone's keeping track. So that was me landing in Liberia during the peak of the Ebola crisis, sort of doing Ebola risk management, like as a surfer, like how likely is a shark going to be to come? And so we basically instantly were sort of run into the most extreme problems that trying to keep basic infrastructure running could have, on top of like superstitions and very real concerns around the sustainability of it. So we had 220 projects there. The stats aren't that important. Just know that I have one of these pages in an in-depth report for all 16 countries where we initiated projects. What's interesting is that the theme that's going to come out of all of these, which is the work that we wanted to do, even though we were providing funding and technology, would not have been possible without removing all possible barriers we could have towards local empowerment and learning from the people that were there. Because the context and the people involved in these projects are really 80 to 90% of the success, and it's just something that you cannot learn. You're not going to learn it, or unless you want to dedicate yourself to one place. You have this unbelievable wealth of knowledge that unlocks either the success or failure of your projects, and it's in the people that live there. And so I was faced with a bunch of people, because it's like Twitter and Facebook, all the funders of Charity Water are these kind of big people that speak in hundreds of millions. And so they're like, oh, you only have 15,000 projects, it's only 22 countries. The task, the true daunting nature of the task became clear that I knew that I had to kind of crowdsource it, right? So the next easy country I went to was straight to the Central African Republic. Coney's like hanging out in the upper right-hand side of this map, and Christians and Muslims are killing each other in the blue, and the green was like the safe place. That's not where we ended up working though. So we were able to basically set these guys up with very little investment on our part. As a small business, they loaded up these trucks and would go on 3-month missions, because there was no cell phones, and just do maintenance visits. And basically, by convincing the communities that they were going to come, they would be able to start viable businesses. We just had to help them in terms of upfront costs, in terms of getting capital for these parts and pumps into the company. And so now, we have 5 of these trucks. They're serving over 2,000 water points, which is keeping water flowing for about 500,000 people. The next place we went to, Malawi, we were starting a much more sophisticated program there. It was tariffed banking and microloans around the fees that were being collected. And then we just got like hit by a huge floods in Malawi at the end of 2014. So same thing. The only way we were able to respond to this was by using local communities, empowering local people, and not trying to come in with the answer, knowing that we had the technology. So that's why I sort of started this as a question of like nuance, right? So it's not fair to say like, oh, well, all local people can solve their own problems, because that's just not true. Like, there's an engineer in Germany that does know significantly more about hydrogeology and certain series of technologies than a villager in Malawi. So we can't romanticize these issues. In my world, everybody who's a farmer today probably shouldn't be, right? There's non-viable plots of lands that it's easy to romanticize a small farmer on a hillside. Probably some large percentage of them need new occupations or need to join together in a cooperative. So the nuance of this is important, but it is also, on the flip side, we're not going to roll in and parachute in with all the answers in terms of technology and techniques. Same thing in Uganda. This is probably our most, we have some of the best programmers in the world working at Charity Water. We designed a mobile banking platform for them to overlay. We got there and they were, without even looking at the code, which I was so insulted, they're like, this will never work. They showed us why. They brought us to what we were replacing, which was a wooden box. The thing that we can't notice from New York is it has 3 locks on it. The 3 locks have keys that are given to 3 different people in the community, and they sometimes have to hide it with other people within the community so that there's a dispersed responsibility and risk. So we had to redesign our online data payment system in Uganda to mimic the 3-lock system. So that's where we've got this sort of communications challenge really being reinforced by people that understand the culture and the challenge that's being faced. This is the photo you see that raises money for wells in India. And what we were able to do is make sure that this cute little girl, oh, she's so cute, I love this photo, is supported by a guy that actually has reliable parts that are quality controlled and checked. Very, very important that they're not selling cheap parts that erode confidence in the market. He's not going to do anything without the Jalabandhu, that means well keeper, and we gave him a microloan to make sure that he could afford the tools that he has there and the bicycle that he uses to get around to create his clients. He doesn't do anything without her permission. This is the community health worker, the person that's making sure that the clean water is also coupled with hand washing. This is the water user committee. You're never gonna leave the pump handle up, boys, I'll tell you what, with this crew here. And then this is the next generation. This is the wash committee at the school. So, other things we worked on, different toilets, sanitation initiatives, same thing, just the learning was so much more powerful and more impactful by being very humble about the technology that we were bringing and making sure there was tons of room of iteration and that we were thinking about the first 2 to 3 years and not getting just to day 0. And it allows us to do things like this in Rwanda, where these are sophisticated pumps, where we have links between German engineers, and these guys are capable of working on these sophisticated motors. There's an extra one installed, there's redundancies, there's an appropriate level to make sure that this stuff's gonna last a long time. And it comes down to local workmen here. This guy had never used a level, and he'd built 1,000 houses. So this is in Ghana. And then this is a local actors troupe that had been contracted to essentially do theater work on why it's important to wash your hands. So a year and a half later, left Charity Water and really handed over a sustainability that was sort of the inherent piece of the sustainability program, as I had to be able to hand it over to them at some point. Landed back at Systema Biobolsa, where we have just gotten some new investment and we're scaling into something that we want to grow. So as we consolidate those learnings, we continue to focus on empowering local people. None of the people that sell or install our products don't have one. And it looks like this, but it also looks like this, right? We're trying to change hearts and minds. We're trying to build empathy. We're trying to make the argument for something for profound change happen in a really profound way. We're using theater work. We're using kids. We're using play. We're using really simple messages to drive home really important concepts. And we're aspiring to connect with people on a more emotional and empathetic level, where it's not just, here's a technology, it can make your life better. It's, I want my life to be better. I want my neighbor's life to be better. I want this to be a different place, and I believe that I can make that change. That doesn't happen without some actually real intentional work. And so we continue to do that, mixing it with the important technical work that we have to do. Obviously high quality, obviously innovation that continues to move forward, but really being based on the idea that we need to be learning constantly from the people that we're here to serve. And because what we're trying to do is, again, this transition from the ugly to the beautiful, which is what natural ecosystems do. There is no waste in nature, and so we're trying to convey that same message and make sure that other people understand it. That message of transition is both temporal and kind of literal in our message, and so when we think about like returning to the original theme of global technology, universal empowerment, and local learning, I think about these kids a lot. This photo is now 4 years old. These kids had had a digester for about 3 years at this point. So this is a group of young children that will never know a moment in their lives where their cooking gas didn't come from animal manure. They'll never know a moment in their lives where it wasn't logical to recycle waste. So these are kids that have the answers to the next problems that we can't even think about. Their whole context has changed. They have had barriers removed for them to think differently than we can even imagine. And Jack Ma said yesterday with President Clinton on the stage, don't worry about all these problems. The next generation is going to solve it, and it's our job to work for a more just and equitable world in which they don't have barriers to solving these problems. And I thought that sort of blind optimism was a nice way to get through a Tuesday, but I realized that it also transitioned really well to our work. So that's what we're working for, and we have a lot of help along the way, and if there's any other questions, that's where I'm going to end.
Thank you, Alex. That's great. Good job. Got questions? Let's wait for the microphone to get there. Got one right here, Bob.
Hi, my name is Stacy, and I'm a first-year student here at the Clinton School. First, I just want to say thank you for coming to speak to us today. And my question is about, well, there's two parts, so forgive me for that. But the first part is I'm curious about your collaboration with Heifer. And if you haven't been to the village, they have a biogas unit exhibit over there and a treadle pump, so you can walk through and see them. Anyways, in your collaboration with Heifer, do you come in when a recipient has been identified, or do you guys come in after they receive the animals? So that's the first part. And the second part is, I may have missed this, but who handles the maintenance for the biogas units moving forward? Are they educated so that they can repair their own, or are they in need of, you know, mechanics, maintenance, whatever, to come in for repairs?
Great questions. Heifer and I have worked together accidentally, and so I was just spent an hour with them. We're trying to formalize it a little more. We've done about 300 families together, and what that looked like, the Heifer model really asks people to become stewards of their own project to such a degree that they can tangibly give the products or the fruit of their labor to another family. So that's like a really interesting transition point. That's a great moment for us to come into the process. Some percentage of the families that receive like pigs or cows or whatever initially just will like throw a party, eat the pig, and call it a fun time. Some other percentage will grow a pig and it'll continue to flourish, and then they'll have a pig farm or whatever it would be. So we generally come in at the pass-off level, is where we find that that's sort of a threshold that proves that A, we're not going to install a digester with someone that won't have animals in the future, and they've sort of demonstrated a relatively high bar if you think about donation programs in terms of proving the worth of that. The maintenance question is an interesting one. As a company, we've just been like white knuckling it. It doesn't need a lot of maintenance, so it's more about education and making sure people are doing periodic things. We've started 2 new businesses in the last 6 months. One is leasing electrical generators to farmers, where they've got the digester. We just sell them back whatever energy they produce on the meter, so it doesn't cost them anything up front, and we do all the maintenance on the generator. It's not clear that that'll pencil out or not, but we've got new grid-tied contracts in Mexico. So that gives us a great excuse to be visiting the farmer constantly for that maintenance contract. The other is a fertilizer consolidation and commercialization group. So a lot of people have excess fertilizer. They're just not necessarily getting to the point where they're able to sell it for the value that it has. So we're going around buying buying up using a virtual currency, actually, the fertilizer, refining it fine-tuning it for the seasons and the local crops, and then reselling it to bigger purchasers. So actually trying to add value to the system, and that's another opportunity that we have to make sure that we're providing system. But they literally have a 1-800 number, so if a cow falls on the digester and ruptures it, we'll show up and repair it. Besides that, there's not a ton of maintenance, but we really try to be available and kind of proactive reminders. We send like text messages and stuff like that.
Right here.
Hey, my question is about your metrics that you use for your company. Specifically, what metrics do you use? What data do you capture? Is it just ROI, or is there more things that you capture? And if so, what capacities do you use to capture that data and analyze it? Because you mentioned that you had a lot of challenges as a small organization. So how do you overcome that?
That's a great question. So ROI, I like to say it because it comes out very simply. The truth is it's an aggregated metric of many other things, right? So to get to ROI, we have to have first recorded all the baseline data. So that's a really exciting thing about our project, is that we've recorded all the baseline data for every farm that we've ever visited. What actually makes it great for data nerds is that some percentage of the people that we got baseline data for didn't buy a digester. So we can actually use them as a control group to basically say, here's 100 farms that looked about the same in the same region. There was an intervention, and then you can clearly see a difference in a certain set of metrics from that. So we try to be very strict about ROI, so it's only direct, literal cash flow differences and savings. So it's not like, well, I'll turn time into money. It's literally only their change in their balance. So that's specifically, a lot of people actually buy wood in Mexico. They buy gas and they buy chemical fertilizers. Some people have added value add to their agricultural products, so cheeses and dairies with excess gas, they can make cheese and butters and things like that. Some people have hired either more or less people in terms of chemical application, or going from hand milking to actual milking machines. So that all folds up into ROI. We have a climate change monitoring program, so we do that as a survey, random sample survey around methane from the waste, fossil fuel, and fertilizers. And we also have a whole microfinance organization kind of wrapped into what we do. So our repayment rates, and then the thing that I'm the least good at, but we've gotten much, much better as we've become profitable and grown, is just a straight up business balance sheet that anyone who doesn't care about social impact can understand. So we run P&Ls and we do weekly sales reports and stuff like that. So that is sort of the strain of metrics. The thing that that's actually gaining popularity in terms of an actual methodology is the sort of narrative and storytelling around like great changes. So like actually capturing sort of unguided information about how people perceive their lives were changed. And we have a really interesting study about how people's perceptions of like our black and white, like what they really saved and how much they think they saved, which is really interesting. A lot of people think they saved a lot more, and then there's like a whole group of people that think they saved like less than they really did, and there's all these gender biases around that, so that's putting out really fascinating data, and then we tell a lot of stories. Our website's new and up, and it has a ton, we have maybe 25 YouTube videos that are very like really cool like narratives and interviews, and some of the stories I told here you can find there. Charity Water also really excellent storytelling. Some of the most compelling sort of stories of change, and that's kind of what they're famous for. So definitely check out their website, a number of videos. And they're commodifying that storytelling, and so it's an important part of their model. So definitely something to think about.
Amanda, you had your hand up right there.
My name is Amanda. I'm a second-year student here at the Clinton School. Thank you so much for being here. My question goes on to your monitoring and evaluation. When you're going back to these the projects, when you're for year 2, year 5, whatever, do you have people in the local community that you trust to go and do whatever evaluation, or you find yourself or your team going back?
It depends a little bit. We have to use pretty strict methodology when we're reporting against carbon offsets. So we have to send someone dedicated, third party. They show up with a smartphone, so it's all GPS. So we know that they're not faking. So wherever they fill out the survey, it links the GPS, the time, logs it to a specific person. So all the data they fill out goes straight to the cloud. And then we have local people that do the same thing. So that's a big, I think, strength of our model, is that there's not a high technical burden for any given part of the installation. So this time of year, for example, we have about 100 people working for me today. Like literally today. It might not be that tomorrow, but I know that we went over 100 people today. Anyways, the point being that these people are like digging trenches, building walls, doing maintenance, modifying gas lines, repairing stoves. So a lot of those things, we try to make our technology as sort of adaptable to the local conditions as possible and try to employ as many local people. And so our next big reveal that we're launching is basically a global franchising system that allows people to replicate this as small businesses around the world, where we just follow with the quality control and giving them messaging and best practices, and both receiving learning from all of these different people so that we can then diffuse it out. So we're really trying to think about how this expands, and mobile computing and platforming really helps in that sense.
Question out there.
You answered part of a question. I was wondering about your suppliers and whether they were directly involved in your locations in Africa. I knew of an organization, private enterprise, that was trying to do that here, and unfortunately couldn't get off the ground. Do your suppliers, are they actively participating in a way in which they maintain personnel separate from your company's employees? And the employees you have in your company, are they local, or are they from other countries that go in there?
That's a great question. I think the strange reality around some of the most impactful work is that the next level suppliers from the group that's actually implementing are people that aren't that public facing. So my suppliers, for example, are membrane companies. They don't care what the public thinks about them. They have like very little CSR. They're not really engaged in that sense, but their products are having these unbelievable impacts. Water wells, for example, in Africa, you know, these are the same steel pipe suppliers that are sending it to, like, for oil and gas and massive infrastructure projects. They almost seem unaware of the fact that some percentage of their pipes are actually just literally changing people's lives. So I think I'm going to pile on maybe to your comment, because I'm not exactly sure the experience of your friend, but I've sensed that there is a lack of coordination in terms of both the good feelings that these suppliers could feel, and also the efficiencies we could gain, because you have these small NGOs importing little bunches of the same thing. So there's certainly, in terms of resource allocation and logistics and a bunch of the things that have become headaches for me, I've seen a ton of opportunities for better efficiency. And I think it's a wide open field as we generally start professionalizing development and generally start empowering local people a little bit more to be able to say, like, well, why are we thinking about my village? My region needs this much steel pipe, so let's send a whole boat and not just like half a container. I'm not sure if that's exactly where your question was going, but there's certainly a lot more engagement. Like, the amount of membrane I use compared to what they make for like huge mines and stuff, they literally should be giving it to me. Like, they would not even move the needle in their world, and the amount of like public relations good that I could give them, and probably like carbon offsets and stuff, but I can't even like get a conversation with the person in charge because of the small amounts that we actually buy. So I think the systemization and better efficiency around like raw materials that go to these things is an area wrought with opportunity, and you don't have a huge cross section with like chemical industrial engineers and like Peace Corps volunteers. So like that overlap, I think, could make a lot of good in these sectors.
Thank you.
I think what you guys are doing is such a great I guess, a great deal. And I was wondering, you had mentioned donations. Are your donations primarily for like organization-based from organizations, or do you have any way of the general public to make donations or to volunteer to help your cause?
We personally are horrible at it, actually. So we don't really get, well, let me rephrase that. Sorry. We have done a relatively good job of attracting, we've won a lot of awards, a lot of competitive bidding things. We've gotten donations from big foundations. We're supported by Kellogg Foundation, the Nature Conservancy, the Inter-American Development Bank. A number of large organizations have helped out my smaller organization. The public, on the other hand, is who has been engaged by Charity Water. And so they would probably be at the other end of the spectrum where they really avoid foundation money. They never want money from USAID. They really want to create a groundswell of movement and compassion. They would prefer to get $1 from 1 million people than $1 from, although in the dark of the night, if you ask the CEO, I don't know that he would answer exactly that. But the idea is that it's more important that more people care about it than it is about the volume of money that's generated, right? So if you find yourself in New York, that's a place where they'd love volunteers. You could start right now, I met Edward Norton yesterday. He's got another thing where you can just start a campaign in like 30 seconds, and you can just basically an online fundraising platform and dedicate it to any charity that you wanted. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for the public, and I think arguably what you're seeing is a shift where philanthropy used to be this domain of high net worth individuals and big foundations, and now we're seeing on the political spectrum in like a 2008 Barack Obama, but also in fundraising where you've got this balance of power, realizing that crowd and like public interest in something can actually sum to very, very interesting amounts of money that can create great change. So something I'd like to get better at. We're trying to run as a social business, so I'm really just really focused on small farmers. And but obviously, if anyone wants to donate, I could figure out a way to take your money. I promise you. Right
Good time for one more question. Helen Grace.
Thank you so much for coming. My name is Helen Grace, and I am a second-year student. One of the first things that you said was that you always strive to be wildly curious. Well, my curiosity is in the lines of empathy. And in your talk, you said that empathy is learned. And so I was wondering, as you've traveled across several countries, or you've traveled across the world, how has empathy played a role in projects such as Charity Water? Not just for you, but for the communities that you're impacting?
That's a great and not simple question. I'm going to use a more simple example, and maybe it will highlight. So in Latin America, there is a deep tradition of cooperatism. So people sort of traditionally get together and they'll bulk purchase grains or seeds. They'll have a number of small community committees and things like that that will sort of organically form around challenges that they face in their community, and you'll have different people engaged civically. So when it comes time to, say, organizing around group lending or trying to get a group of people together to learn something or to try to promote something, it's a lot easier to do, and you sense within that an empathetic connection. You have these like generational things. You sense that there's a lot of cousins and uncles in the room. Now in Haiti, a number of organizations went in there assuming that they were going to give wells to the community. So the term tragedy of the commons is actually a technical economic term. It couldn't be more clear than that. So basically, a group of NGOs or whatever would come and put a well in the middle of a community, and the community's left after after that group's left, they're sitting there thinking, well, who does this belong to? Because the idea of collective ownership in a group of people that were inherently displaced, are displaced internally very, very often due to poverty, then the earthquake, and a number of other disasters. You have communities of people that don't know each other, that don't know their neighbor, and since there's a a background of some violence and theft and things like that, you just have this environment of distrust, which is almost insurmountable when it comes to trying to move communities forward. The answer to that question is to find the brightest, strongest, sometimes even biggest guy you can, give him the well and a mandate to run it and metrics to run it by, and then you'll actually have an impactful project that will last a long time. So that, I think, there's a lot of nuanced things, but I think the ability for people to organize themselves and care about the collective rising tide of their community and not just about their own well-being is directly linked to the ability to foster empathy from a young age. It's hard to do when you're literally starving or moving around, right? President Clinton said yesterday that you can look around the world and you can find places where the dialogue in the environment focuses on inclusion, it focuses on love, it focuses on things that allow us to think forward, and you can see those as hotbeds of innovation. You can see that inclusion, that universal empowerment, and the reduction of barriers as places where humanity are taking measurable steps forward versus places where the talents of humans are used to survive, such as in a refugee crisis or where people are starving. And that's generally when there's violence against other groups or whatever. So you see that basically you have a squandered empathy, of squandered innovation, all of this stuff on just trying to stay alive versus thriving and moving forward. So empathy really sits at the heart of that. The more that we're inclusive and loving, and that is what permeates every other thing that we do, the more likely any of these projects or any of us are to be successful.
Well, let's give Alex a round of applause. What a great program.
Thank you.
And you could tell we could probably go on all night with questions. So if any of you all have any questions, please come up and visit with him. Alex, thanks again. Thank you all for being with us.